Today we're shedding light on Rise Mzansi.
She's a Gauteng premier candidate of Rise Mzansi. She happens to be number 2 on the national list.
Oh, you are great.
For voters, what does that mean?
No, thanks. Good question, actually. And you've correctly observed the lists have just been published. So this is fresh off the press. You will remember that I am also the national chairperson of Rise Mzansi and a founding member of Rise Mzansi.
Are you the next premier of Gauteng?
I am.
Are you
but
winning
only
elections?
with your help.
Are you winning elections?
Remember, we're going into coalition government. Gauteng will not be won by any outright majority. I think I'm the best candidate for Gauteng. And
made that case.
I'm a born and bred Gauteng resident and citizen. I've been here my whole life. And I am deeply committed to turning this province around. It's the economic capital of our country, and we need leaders who understand how to get this economy going again, get people working again, deal with the drugs, pandemics, deal with all the socioeconomic issues. And I think the best man for the job in this case is a woman.
Is this woman? Botani, and welcome to the Sheds. We continue with our political things. It's hip and happening. People are taking each other to court, fighting over logos and names. Promises are being made, and we want to continue showing you that there is more this country has to offer. Today we're shedding light on Rise Mzansi. Joining us is the premier candidate, Gwen. Is it Gwen Ramogkopa? See, if you are a Ramogkopa, it means to get to success. There has to be Ramogkopa somewhere. So there's Gwen Ramogkopa, there's Vuyiswa Ramogkopa, but you have Vuyiswa Ramogkopa. Is there any relationship?
Not directly, let me say. I am married into a very big and very successful family. That is the royal family.
Oh, okay.
Vuyiswa Ramogkopa, the royal family in Limpopo. So we are a very big family, and I'm proud to be married into such a wonderful family.
Welcome to the Sheds.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And guys, it's elections.
Election fever.
Yes,
Election fever. And we're so excited to have you in the studio today. The first question, Mhlekazi, I would like to pose. She's a Gauteng premier candidate of Rise Mzansi. She happens to be number 2 on the national list.
Oh, you are great.
For voters, what does that mean?
No, thanks. Good question, actually. And you've correctly observed the lists have just been published. So this is fresh off the press. You will remember that I am also the national chairperson of Rise Mzansi and a founding member of Rise Mzansi. So that obviously necessitated that I be on both lists, because as we know, we don't know necessarily what the election outcomes will hold. But in saying that, we went through quite an extensive process in terms of our candidate nomination process. So we had both those within the party, but also those outside of the party who were eligible to be on the list. We appointed an independent nomination committee chaired by the former chairperson of the IEC, Dr. Brigalia Bam, and a number of other illustrious, upstanding people in society who formed part of that independent committee outside of ourselves. And every single person who wanted to be a candidate had to submit themselves to that process. And so there was a scoring that was done. We all had to go through interviews.
So it was quite rigorous,
Yeah, and so there were people who have never even been members or signed up to Rise Mzansi who were nominated by the public to be candidates. Many of them have made the list by virtue of scoring high, achieving a high scoring on those lists and by the committee. So what I'm saying is that the outcome is actually a recommendation of the independent nomination committee, of which they recommended me for both Gauteng and for national.
What was the criteria? I mean, in other political parties, there's a list conference. It's the will of the people, meaning the party itself.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, you get to say one from the branch and everything. But you have gone through a process of independent panel and all of that. What was the criteria? What is it that the people had to look at in order to say Kosana must be number 2 or number 3 or number 1?
So let me start actually with the point you're making, that the current process that most parties use of an internal list conference is actually it actually prohibits us from being able to get the best people in society to actually be candidates or have a chance of serving in parliament and in the legislatures. And that is fundamentally what Rise Mzansi is trying to change. We have said from the start that our problem as a country is that we have a leadership crisis. And our leadership crisis stems from the fact that political parties and the people that are available to represent us are not necessarily the best people in society as a whole. So we needed to create a system that was able to draw on the best people in society. So you may find that somebody who's a community leader, somebody who's a business person, somebody who's working in civil society, there are brilliant people in civil society, brilliant people in the media who may want to serve their country, but they can't do so unless they are party members and then they go through the branches and all of that. And in fact, what ends up happening is that you and I, as ordinary citizens, end up having no say on who actually represents us in parliament. So we wanted to give that power back to the people, the public. And what we did was we set up a criteria, a matrix. And that matrix looked at a number of things. It looked at track record and experience. It looked at your academic qualifications, but not limited to. It looked at your contribution. If you have worked within Rise, you did score something for actually working within the party and growing the party. It looked at your community engagements. It looked at your constituency. Maybe where you come from, you're a community leader. And you've got a constituency.
Or you're a pastor.
Or you're a pastor, and you've actually got a lot of people that follow you. And it was a multi-leveled assessment that they used to then kick out a final score. And of course, as I said, we've also went through an interview process. So in that interview process, they asked us serious questions. In fact, you had to study for that interview. Because in that interview, what they were testing was, do you understand the work of actually being a legislator? And so we had to study. I mean, some of the questions they would ask you is exactly that. What do committees do? What are the different spheres of government and what are they responsible for? How do you actually get a piece of legislation passed? And these are things that we expect as a minimum, that if somebody is saying they want to be a public representative, they should know.
Yeah. Mhlaz, I want us to take a step, just one step back before we move to, I know you're excited to talk about elections now, but what formed, one of the co-founders of Rise Mzansi, but when was it formed and what was that stroke that broke the camel's back to say, with so many political parties in South Africa, let's come together as put in commas, as academics, as people that
As a Rivonia cycle.
Yes, Rivonia cycle, to say, let's form our own political. What made that drastic decision?
No, sure. So in the last elections, there were 40 million people who were registered to vote. 28 million of them did not vote. Now, let's just extract that number for a moment. That means only just under 13 million actually exercise their democratic rights. So when we say so-and-so is a majority, so-and-so is a 5% or a 51%, there are only 51% of that little 13 million people that actually exercise their right. So the voice of 28 million people has been unaccounted for in our democracy. And so we started and asked ourselves the question, why is that? Why are people so completely rejecting not just the ANC, but politics in general? Clearly, they are rejecting politics. So that is what necessitated research to be done. We went out into communities. We asked people these questions. Because again, you can't be so arrogant to think that you have all the answers. You have to go and ask people. So we did extensive qualitative research to ask people what they were looking for. And one of the things that they were looking for was, they said, one, the culture of politics in South Africa is very broken. It's this issue we're talking about now. They feel like politicians are accountable only to themselves and not to the people. They are only accountable to their political party. So if somebody does something wrong in a political party and the political party's integrity committee says that they are a great person, then sorry for us, right?
The citizens.
The citizens, our voice doesn't matter in all of that. So those were some of the things that we picked up. And we realized that actually what we are dealing with here is people are not just saying we don't want this party or this party. They're rejecting the whole lot of them. We need to bring them a new crop of leaders. We need to bring them a new type of politics. We need a completely new value proposition that is not burdened by the baggage of all of these other parties.
Tell us what is it that unique thing, that factor that Rise Mzansi is offering our South African citizens, our Gauteng, since we are based in Gauteng as well.
Yeah.
What is that you're offering them as a premier candidate in this province?
So I really think it's three key things that Rise Mzansi has set out to do and is currently achieving. Number one is to be able to source the best leaders in society to lead in the political sphere. So what we have been able to do is to energize the broader South African public. We have in our National Leadership Collective, and our National Leadership Collective is 25 people right now, but it's growing every day. In our National Leadership Collective, we have people from academia, people from business, people from the media.
Yeah.
Our national leader was a former journalist. We have people who have said, I'm willing to down tools in the thing that I'm doing. I was running a very successful business in the property sector. I was able to see a place and a vehicle through which I could actually serve. And so we've been able to energize and activate people who have amazing skills and contributions to make and bring them into politics. And I think this is something that is going to fundamentally change what politics looks and feels like in South Africa. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is that we are one of the few, if not the only, of the major parties that is not a breakaway of any of the other political parties. We
And you're
didn't.
not fighting over logos.
Yeah.
We didn't come about because we didn't get positions. Now we are leaving. Now we are starting our own thing. We came about as a collective of mostly young people who said,
I was about to say that, sorry. The age, I've seen that in your leadership, it's mostly young people. What's the average age there?
look, I'd say our national leader, who's older than most of us, is 48. I'm considered a relative elder in the Rise Mzansi universe.
So Sonez is not the oldest.
No, he's not.
Okay.
Our National Leadership Collective, the youngest member is 21, the oldest is 70.
Okay.
So it's also not just a party for youth. I think what we've tried to do is create a platform where, again, we bring the best. And the best could be of any age. But, and this brings me to number three, I think the third key issue and the thing that Rise Mzansi has set out to do is not just win an election in 2024. We're not a bunch of people who are trying to just win an election so we could get seats.
Yeah.
All of us had other stuff we were doing. And in fact, we've had to sacrifice quite a lot to now make this transition, to do this thing.
So you're taking a pay cut into the legislature.
Yes, absolutely. So, but what we've had but the key thing that we've had to do is say, we need, as this generation, to forge our own generational mission. We need to be able, 25 to 30 years from now, to answer to our children and say, what did we do when our country was crumbling and falling apart? And so even when you read our manifesto and you listen to how we are framing our politics, it's not just about 2024 and winning one election. It is a very long-term mission, and it's a mission that we see as a multi-electoral cycle mission. And of course, we talk about building a safe and equal, a prosperous and a united South Africa in one generation. And why do we say that? Because we're saying that if we don't take a long-term lens about planning the future of our country, we're going to get the outcomes that we get now. So people say, hey, there's an election coming. Come, let's quickly hire 3,000 people, put them in security guards and act like we're working. This is the politics we're used to. Let's make a quick something and then people will forget. And I'm saying that's very high risk. Rise Mzansi is here to stay, and we are looking at the next generation, and we are forming our entire vision and manifesto around a generational mission.
You are here to stay. You are looking at each generation. 32% is unemployed.
Yeah.
That translates to around 12 million people
11.9,
actively looking for employment that are unemployed.
Official unemployment.
Official unemployment. These are the people who are recorded. There's probably some Tatumni or Malume who's not part of the statistic. One of the big things that people are looking for is employment today. Is employment as soon as government is set up at a national level and at a provincial level. How will Rise Mzansi ensure there is no unemployment, or at least there's reduced unemployment levels?
Yeah. So unemployment is obviously top of the agenda for every single South African, including ourselves. But we also need to be realistic again about unemployment. And I personally I take issues with this idea of job creation. Because there's nobody who's sitting in their office creating, just writing jobs.
On a
Those things
spreadsheet.
are not jobs.
Yeah.
Those things that they advertise are called work opportunities. We must read very closely when we read these things. A work opportunity is not a job. It's a short-term thing. Gibodi EPWP and all those things, which are fine temporarily. But we are not dealing with the structural issues of unemployment in our country. And that's why year on year we see that number rising, despite people saying, "By it's our job creation," right? So if we are serious about curbing the unemployment rate, one thing what we have committed to in our manifesto, saying we need to get the rate of economic growth up to between 5 to 6% per year. That is the only way that we start to chip away at actual unemployment. Because if we can grow the economy by 5 to 6% per year, that means we can double the amount of jobs available in the economy year on year. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily take us to an end to unemployment within 3 years. And I am very clear about this. It took us 2 decades plus, more, depending who you ask. It took us decades to get into this mess. It's not going to take us 100 days to get out of it. And we also, as the public, must be realistic about that. But what you need to be able to scrutinize is say, is there an actual plan to grow the economy? Is there an actual plan to grow Black and women-owned businesses? What are we doing to also rethink and restructure, for example, access to finance and funding for small businesses? So that they can scale. You know, we look at our peers in other countries, the likes of, South Korea, the likes, of course, of China, which we always talk about. But there's other countries like Vietnam, like Taiwan. There's countries that have had economic overhauls by putting some structural changes in place. And those are the types of things we are looking at, which are long-term in nature.
Go. I want that, when you think about that, I want us to get into that idea of economic growth, which she is saying will lead to jobs. What is exactly are we talking about when we talk economic growth? What are practical and tangible examples of growing the economy? What is it that needs to be done, which is currently not being done? Hence, economic growth is basically stifled.
So there are a number of things. And there's no, call it silver bullet, if we're honest. But there are 3, perhaps, macro interventions that I think we need to focus on. The one is around growing new industries. And I say new industries because, for example, let's talk about green minerals as an industry. South Africa right now is a very coveted destination for green minerals. And I'm talking about the likes of lithium, etc., that are powering the renewable energy industry globally right now. They are being sourced from South Africa. We ourselves are not building a full green renewables energy value chain in South Africa. When we started having load shedding issues in the way that we're having them, our government imported 12 billion rand worth of solar panels and things to drive renewable energy penetration in South Africa. Now, what could have happened if we were manufacturing those 12 billion rand worth of solar panels here? Instead, what has happened is we've taken 12 billion rand of our money and given it to the Chinese. So we need to focus on, one, looking at those opportunity areas where there are new industries growing. And I say this not because I want to throw away the current industries. We must still continue to invest in our existing industries like coal, et cetera. But what I'm saying is that there are such amazing new industries on the horizon. And if we want to create a lot of new jobs, we need to be looking at some of those areas, which brings me to the second part. We have, over the last 2 decades, completely shattered our industrial production capabilities as a country. We don't produce. We don't produce enough.
So we import.
We import a lot of things. We are still good at like agriculture and food exporting, etc., but we are not doing value-added production in the way that a country like ours, which is actually quite an advanced economy technologically, we should be able to do much more advanced manufacturing and importing. Again, a country like ours, 30 years into our democracy, we don't have a single vehicle manufactured in South Africa. We've got engineers, we've got mathematicians. I don't know what type of people are used for cars. We've got these people here, but we don't produce that stuff. We are all using cell phones from South Korea, from China, from Gai. Why don't we have a cell phone here? During COVID, again, there was a time when they wanted to give children iPads and laptops and things. Instead of speaking to the manufacturers and saying, come and manufacture them here, so that even if we don't have capabilities now, but come and set up a factory here so that we can produce it here. So the government can take its money and spend it on local production. So we need to increase local production, and we need to look at those key industries that we're going to focus on that are high labor intensive industries. One of those, for example, is the clothing and textile industry. You remember, there was a time when we were leading in clothing and textile. It was powering the Western Cape economy. Globalization came, Chinese imports came, decimated the clothing and textile industry. Now, what is interesting and that's happening is that, in fact, China, because it's now a lot more advanced and they're moving to now being a nice middle income, high income country, they're not producing at those low rates anymore. So there's an opportunity for us to get into that type of manufacturing and to dominate that space, and so on and so forth. So that's number two. So one was new industries. Two is saying we need to focus on manufacturing, local production. Number three, access to capital and venture capital for businesses. And I'm not just talking about small businesses here. I'm saying even medium-sized enterprises. When you and I, average entrepreneur who's got a good idea on your hands, where do you go to go and get money? It's either you go with your begging bowl to NYDA and hope that you know someone because the connections go NYDA, and I don't want to name, but I'm just saying, or you go to the bank and you get told, no, we can't lend you because you're a high risk. You don't
collateral.
How not collateral. If we are a country that's serious about entrepreneurship, we have to invest and have a serious pool of venture capital funding. And government should actually be coming in as a partner and being able to de-risk some of this lending. Right?
Does that mean you would support state bank?
So this is what I'm saying. There are a number already of state banks, by the way. So it's not about whether I support it or not. I think have a state bank if you're going to have a state bank. But it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't help us if your state bank is going to have the same lending mandate or outlook as a normal retail bank, right? So right now, there's a thing called NEF. NEF was supposed to be there for Black empowerment funding. But the lending rate at NEF is higher in most cases than what you will get at the bank. Because they themselves have to go and get capital from the same capital markets that the bank is getting. And so it doesn't help us to have all these myriad of institutions if they are unable to do the basic thing they're supposed to do.
So where does venture capital come?
No, hear me out. It's concessionary financing that is required. And it must be very intentional that government does not need to make a profit off of funding entrepreneurs and business people. They need to maybe not like lose money, right? But not losing money means, it doesn't mean you have to lend at 12, 13, 14%.
So they can just break even.
Yeah, you can break even. But that's something that government can back. PIC, for example, is very quick to give money to people, buddy BE deal, that are buying a stake of something, right? PIC will give you billions to do that. But they won't give you 1 million to scale up your studio here to then go and become the next to become the next ENCA or whatever it is you want to become, right? So I'm saying these are political decisions that get made, and to do that you need a government that is responsive, a government that is a state that is entrepreneurial by nature, by design. Look at the likes of Huawei. Sorry, I'm rambling, but this is a topic I'm very passionate about, right? So Huawei, as a phone company, today many of us are using Huawei phones. That is a state-owned, state-supported company. Now, can our government produce a thing like Huawei? They could never, because first, before you even finish your business plan, there's somebody who wants their 30%. And then you'll be lucky if your business plan even makes it, because if you don't give them the 30%, they're taking your business plan by Nkosana. And then Nkosana utla 30%, how you won't get a tender. That idea will never see the light of day.
Mrs. Vuyiswa, I want us to shift gear in the interest of time as well. Your manifesto also, you speak about, that's what they speak about, Mzansi, banning of blue lights, and also supporting, I think, women and doing oversight, MPs doing oversight on on government as well.
Yeah.
If you could touch on that as well, and I want to bring it to Gauteng
Yeah.
at home. Should you be the next premier of Gauteng?
Because
I want to
lights.
ban blue lights.
Remember Corona.
Guys, people must just be punctual.
Yeah.
They must keep time.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no need for blue lights and moving people out of the road and being a hazard. Just drive at the speed limit and keep time.
Yeah.
You can have your entourage for security reasons, but there is no scientific reason for blue lights. In far richer countries than ours, you have public representatives who take public transport. They use the train to get to work.
Using the rear buyer.
Yeah, the
Yes.
fire, how train.
Well, we
taxi.
are coming there. We are coming there because, again, one of the things we haven't done adequately is to invest in a functional, easy to use, world-class public transport system. I would far rather use public transport than to sit in traffic for 2 hours a day trying to get back and forth.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does to the economy, right? But I want to come back to the topic of women. And Rise Mzansi has been very intentional about talking about women and how we want to create an enabling environment for women to thrive. And it's not just because I'm a woman and so I want to do for myself. No. 45% of households in South Africa are headed by single mothers. This is a fact. It's a statistic. Most of us, as we sit here, were raised by single mothers. So, but the plight of single mothers and what we have experienced and heard from community engagements is that many women, especially lower income women, because as single mothers, they have to choose between whether they're going to take a full-time job that is going to keep them out of their home for most of the day, 14 hours of the day, or whether they're going to rather sit at home and look after their children. Because if they don't, then their children are looking after themselves. So we are saying, one, we need to invest in childcare, proper childcare, daycare facilities in every single community. Two, we need special tax dispensations for single mothers because the cost of actually being a single mother and having to now carry the burden of paying for childcare, paying for this, paying for that, must be offset and supported by
So
government.
they should be able
in
to
some way.
claim from SARS.
Yes, absolutely. Now imagine now, you've got, as I'm saying, 45% of households are headed by women. So if you're taking money, putting it directly back into my pocket as a mother, guess where that's going? That's going into my child's extramurals. It's putting food on my table. Or stokfele, you know, so which is good also. We must go to the stokfels to buy a uniform and all those things. And this is how we need to think about this economy, is that it's not just about these high-level bombastic ideas. We need to come down to the real. Politics is personal. We need to come back to what are the things that will tangibly, meaningfully affect people's lives. Lastly, you asked me about being premier. There are a number of things that I think need to be done, obviously. One of them that I'm very passionate about, again, is spatial planning. We know that we are still living with the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, where you have the average South African, and it's called the 40-40-40 rule, which says the average, particularly Black South African, lives 40 kilometers away, spends 40% of their income on transport, and lives in a 40 square meter house. It's the 40-40-40 rule for a young Black South for a Black South African, right? So if we are going to structurally change our economy and also structurally change the lived experience of a Black South African in one generation, we have to start with rethinking even the very space that we live in as a province, as a city, as a country, right? So why is it that a Black child must wake up at 5 a.m. just to get to Wits?
Orange farm,
From Orange farming. Now, that's already takes, it's 2 or 3. Then by the time they get there, they're already tired, you know. Bobby and Becky got dropped off at the door. They had breakfast. They slept for 2 extra hours. This is how structural inequality multiplies itself. So we have to be able to be intentional about that and say, we want to invest in low-cost, high-density development, close to work, close to home. We have to look at every single township because we're not going to lift people up and move them again, right? That time is gone. But we need to look at every single township area now and say, how do we create micro economies out of this? It's saying township economy. Please don't get me wrong. Né? I'm not saying a special economy for township people. I'm saying
Microeconomic.
I'm saying, what is the economy of this area? We must then ensure that we turn, for example, whatever area it may be, Hammanskraal, for example. Let's look at Hammanskraal and say, let's make Hammanskraal a special economic zone and encourage investment into Hammanskraal itself. So that those ones that are coming to manufacture solar panels must manufacture them there or Hammanskraal. So that the people of Hammanskraal can have work close to where they live. And they don't have to travel 40 kilometers. And immediately there's an immediate bounce back, because now that you've got people working, you need shops. So, and if you need shops, and then you need schools. And as people's income rise, they want better schools. So now Bokuro come. They see an opportunity, then they want to put a school there. This is how you build an economy.
Because we've completely run out of time. Bongani has stopped signaling 1 minute left. He has given up. Are you the next Premier of Gauteng?
I am.
Are you
But
winning
only
elections?
with your help.
Are you winning elections?
Remember, we're going into coalition government. Gauteng will not be won by any outright majority. I think I'm the best candidate for Gauteng. And I'm a born and bred Gauteng resident and citizen. I've been here my whole life. And I am deeply committed to get to turning this province around. It's the economic capital of our country, and we need leaders who understand how to get this economy going again, get people working again, deal with the drugs, pandemics, deal with all the socioeconomic issues. And I think the best man for the job in this case is a woman.
Is this woman? Okay. Lastly, Rise Mzansi versus Arise Mzansi. Who came first, and why have you not had court battles that you stole my name and cars and everything?
No, look, the matter was adjudicated by the IEC. At the time when we registered, because we didn't register immediately. We had been in existence since 2020.
Started with fancy word.
We started just working the ground. In fact, before we went to the IEC, we spent 6 months working the ground before we went to the IEC. Others ran to the IEC. It's fine. And it's Arise South Africa, it's Rise Mzansi. The logos are very different. The names are also different. So when we registered, there was an objection that was lodged by Arise. The IEC adjudicated on the matter and saw no conflict and no potential confusion. So I think the key thing now is just to make sure that people remember that Rise Mzansi, this is our logo, this is who we are, and we are the new leaders that people are looking for.
And you are rising.
And we are very much rising.
Thank you very much for joining us. We wish you good luck with the elections. Let's hope the electorate will see value in your proposition and support you. You've been watching the shares. We've been shedding light joined by Vuyiswa Ramogkopa of Rise Mzansi. She says she's the next premier of Gauteng province. Get used to that. It's your call. You will decide. Thank you very much. Keep watching. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.